We
are
We
are cultivate.
Cultivate.
We are cultivate.
Hello and welcome to a special mini-sode of Ye Olde Crime, the show where Maddie and I discuss the funny, strange, and obscure crimes of yesteryear every Wednesday. This special bi-weekly segment is called Can You Crack the Cramp-Word, which is slang for a difficult or obscure term, which I thought was very fitting. And joining me today is Gavin from the Art of Crime podcast. And before we begin, I'd like to give him the opportunity to tell us a little more about himself and his show before we begin. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, so my name's Gavin. I'm the host and creator of The Art of Crime, which is a history podcast about the unlikely collisions between true crime and the arts. As for who I am, before I went into podcasting, I was a theater historian. So I studied the history of that art form. And I wrote a dissertation about horror theater in London from 1794 to 1931. So I wrote a lot about ghost plays, Frankenstein plays, vampire plays, all that stuff because it was, all the rage back in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was doing that research, I wrote a chapter about sort of like the Victorian craze for true crime entertainment and the way that they were thinking about different spheres of culture in theatrical terms. So they started to talk about, sensational homicide trials as though they were plays. They started looking at public executions as though they were plays. And strangely enough, they started thinking about Madame Tussauds Wax Museum as a form of theatrical entertainment. And of course, true crime was a big feature at Tussauds Wax Museum with the Chamber of Horrors.
Yep.
So my entire podcast sort of grew out of that chapter in my dissertation. As I said, it's sort of about the unlikely collisions between true crime and the arts. So it comes out in seasons. Each season is structured around a different theme. My first season was called The Unusual Suspects, Artists Accused of Being Jack the Ripper. It is what it sounds like.
Yep.
So I looked at 6 artists who have been accused of committing the Whitechapel murders, including Lewis Carroll and others besides him. Season 2 is about assassins, so artists who are variously involved in assassinations or attempted assassinations. John Wilkes Booth was probably the biggest name there. And then I just wrapped up an entire season on Madame Tussauds and the Chamber of Horrors. So, yeah.
That's awesome. It's like you knew what I was going to ask you because you hit on a bunch of the things that I was going to ask you about, like as you were introducing the show. So now it's going to be kind of a reiteration of what you said a little bit, but
I can elaborate.
but I suppose to some extent, like when it comes to the intersection of art and crime, is it a lot more common than people think, would you say?
I think so. I mean, it's more common even than I think because oftentimes, when I was thinking of ideas for seasons when I started the show, right? And I happened to know that an actor named Richard Mansfield was accused of committing the Whitechapel murder. So Richard Mansfield originated the dual role of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and was playing it in London at the time of the Ripper's killing spree. And he was just so terrifying on stage as Mr. Hyde that an audience member wrote in to the police and said, he's your man. Like, this guy has to be Jack the Ripper. It has to be him. So I happen to know about that theory, and I happen to know about Lewis Carroll. I was like, I wonder if I could do an entire season about artists who've been accused of being Jack the Ripper. And I was like, maybe, I mean, that sounds really like, no way. There can't be that many who have fallen under suspicion. I got online and lo and behold, actually there are quite a few to choose from. And I had to cut some from the final product. So yeah, I think these kinds of intersections are more common than you might imagine.
It's interesting because I suppose when you first start thinking of the term art, you might automatically just assume like a painting or something, but like art is a much broader subject than just what you see in a museum. So it's interesting to kind of hear what you bring in your episodes as far as thinking outside of a painting, if that makes sense. Like art is much broader.
Absolutely. I was aware of that. I knew that. I mean, if someone said art to me, I would think of painting for sure, and I think a lot of people would. But yeah, I'm not on the show. I try to keep art broadly construed. So, I've covered like sculpture, goldsmithing, playwriting, filmmaking, wax modeling. I mean, I did a whole season on Tussaud.
Mhm.
There's all kinds of crazy popular art forms that come up in the Tussaud season because, she traveled. She really came of age in Paris,
Mhm.
but eventually she left to go to London, and then from there she toured the English provinces and Scotland and Ireland. So she was part of this circuit of traveling performers. And man, everything you could imagine, these people were doing, the organ grinders, knife swallowers.
Mhm.
She toured with a guy named Paul Philidor, who was a pioneer of the phantasmagoria. I don't know if you've
Okay.
come across that. Yeah, so it's as you know, and as listeners might know, it was this like magic lantern performance. Magic lantern was sort of like, an early precursor to like a slide projector, but they would paint ghosts and skeletons and other creepy beings on these glass
Mhm.
slides and then insert them into this device, and then the magic lantern would project those images onto a projection surface, whether it was just a wall or sometimes a column of smoke, which was pretty awesome if you think about it, because then you have like
Mhm.
ghosts like billowing and they're all like vaporous and wraith like. So yeah, I mean, I cover all kinds of different art forms, and that's because, as you say, art is like much broader than we might think. But it's also just a way of like keeping some variety in the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You mentioned your dissertation, which I love that you mentioned it because that was one of my questions. So, when it came to horror theater in London, would you say that a lot of it is probably in part inspired by like your Penny Dreadfuls and things like that? It is in addition to your like Mary Shelley Frankenstein and things of that nature that would already be productions.
It's definitely related to the Penny Dreadful. It's part of that. A lot of times they would adapt novels for the stage. So you have Frankenstein, of course, and then The Vampire also started out as a novella by John Polidori. There's a really popular ghost play in 1794 that was adapted from a novel by Anne Radcliffe. So you do have some novels, and then a lot of times what was going on in the 19th century was that it was basically like a terrible time to be a playwright because it was impossible to make money and theater managers did not want to pay you anything. So
Yep.
instead of writing new plays from scratch, what a lot of people did was translate plays from French because that just took much less time compared to like, you know, engineering this brilliant new play. And so a lot of the like weird, creepy horror theater in London actually arrived in the British capital by way of Paris.
Okay.
Yeah, but then you do have I actually it's so interesting that you asked about Penny Dreadfuls because I don't know of any Penny Dreadfuls that inspired plays.
Like, the one that came to mind for me would be, like, Spring-Heeled Jack, if there was anything about, like, your more paranormal type of Penny Dreadfuls that they would have regarding the romantic notion of this monster secreting this woman away, and she's, that sort of the Phantom and the Opera type of play,
Right.
but that was the first one that kinda came to mind.
I actually don't know if they're I would not be surprised if Spring-Heeled Jack did not appear in some play throughout the 19th century, but I myself have not come across one. But a lot of those, he's sort of a folkloric figure, sort of an urban
Mhm.
legend, right? And you do get a
Yep.
lot of those folkloric figures, like, there are plays about the Flying Dutchman,
Mhm.
stuff like that. There are actually a lot of plays inspired by true crime as well, and, these were actually very hard to stage because, theater was censored at this point in history. So if you wanted to stage a play, you had to get permission to do so, and the censors sort of frowned upon true crime entertainment. They considered it morally suspect.
Gotcha.
But that said, there still was true crime entertainment on stage. It just happened at these sort of illegal theaters that were particularly in the east of the city in poorer regions, and these were called penny gaffs. and they would stage like murder plays there, plays about murders that had happened recently, but also, maybe a few decades earlier. And the kind of people who went to those kinds of theaters, penny gaffs, may well have read Penny Dreadfuls and consumed that kind of literature,
Sure.
right? So even if there must have been Penny Dreadful. There are so many plays in the 19th century. You like don't. It's like movies today. I mean, and like
Yep.
theatrical entertainment in the 19th century was like the cool, like the hottest. Well, I don't want to say the hottest, but it was as popular then as movie going is now, right? So there are just
Mhm.
so many plays, it's impossible to read them all, and a lot of the scripts have gotten lost. But anyway, certainly these kinds of horror performances and true crime plays were made for an audience that might have enjoyed things like Penny Dreadfuls.
Cool. I think you kinda answered my last question, which was that you're on your 3rd season now, and then I was gonna ask you about what your first couple seasons were about, but you already answered that. So, do you perhaps then have a plan for your 4th season that you are looking into if you haven't already started it?
Yeah, I was actually working on it earlier today. So I do have a plan for the fourth season. It's all about crimes that have taken place in New York,
Okay.
starting in 1800 and going up to like the 1930s. And I'm really excited about this season because, in the first three seasons, I've done a lot of artist biographies. So, like, I mentioned Richard Mansfield a few minutes ago. He was the Jekyll and Hyde actor. There's like a
Mhm.
whole episode about him and what his life was like. I mean, he struggled. He actually had this really pretty amazing biography, but, he really struggled to like make it as an actor, and then he hit it big, and then he, got the rights to perform Jekyll and Hyde, and then like the most famous like Ian McKellen of London acting saw him in New York and was like, you have to come to London and do this. So
Mhm.
the episode, and that's how he then went on to get fingered as a Ripper suspect, right? When he
Yep.
was performing in London. So, I've done a lot of artist biography, and each episode is kind of structured around a single artist. But for this
Mhm.
next season, it's going to work very differently. And I'm excited about that because a lot of episodes involve a group of people, there's kind of a bigger cast of characters. So,
Sure.
to give just one example, have you covered the Manhattan Well murder by chance on your show?
No, but now I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it is one to get intrigued by because it is actually the murder was committed in 1799, but the trial took place in 1800, and it became the first fully recorded murder trial in US history.
Mm.
So, I know, and that's partly because people were learning how to write in shorthand,
Sure,
but it's
sure.
also because, the legal system had evolved in such a way that, court transcripts could make for more compelling reading. Basically, well, there's much more to be said about that. But yeah, so in that case, there are just like a lot of different characters, and I almost have structured the episode like a puzzle mystery, sort of in the style of
Sure.
Agatha Christie, and
Yeah.
so that's really cool. And then it's also good. I'm excited about the season two because art is broad, right? But crime is
Mhm.
broad too. Like, and up until now, I've almost exclusively covered murders or attempted murders, and
Mhm.
this season is going to feature, oh my god, it's going to feature like the most famous bank robber of the 19th century who trained as an
Sure.
architect and like used his architectural knowledge to carry out these daring heists. And then there's actually this insane story about a painter who moved to New York and started painting society portraits of like, rich people in New York.
Mhm.
And basically one of his patrons like did not pay him. So what he did in response was basically to paint a new portrait of the same patron, and he painted ass's ears on top of the patron and displayed the painting in public. And the patron sued him for libel because he's like, "You're trying to make it seem like I have ass's ears on my head." And the painter was like, "Bring it on. Like, this isn't libel."
Mhm.
And they actually expanded the legal definition of libel because of this case, and the
Oh,
painter was found
wow.
guilty. Yeah, it's this, like, crazy story, and you feel bad
That's
for the guy,
crazy.
because
Yeah.
he got screwed over by his patron, and then he got screwed over by his patron again, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's always interesting to me when I'm, like, researching a case, just how much random legal things will change as a result of a crime case, a court case.
Yes.
So a perfect example is, I think it was 2 years ago, I can't remember the exact number because 'cause we've done so many episodes, but we covered this British court case where it was the Crown versus I wanna say his name was Dudley, and it was regarding the custom of the sea, so cannibalism, because you're stranded on the sea. And so this man was being brought to court because they were arguing whether he murdered the person to be able to cannibalize him, or if it was a mercy killing to then
Oh
be
my
able to
god.
cannibalize him knowing that he was already gonna die. So it was this, like, weird, like, legal thing where up until that point, it was just kind of like an understood thing, like, you do what you have to do out at sea to survive, and no one's gonna
Right.
judge you for it, right? But because he purposefully ended this man's life, even though he had been drinking seawater and he would have passed away anyway,
Right.
it changed the entire legal system around cannibalism at sea and whether or not it's murder.
Oh
It's
my
just
gosh. I
bizarre.
love that. I love that the cannibalism is just not an issue. They're like,
Yeah,
like, as you said, you do what you gotta do, but it also goes to show that clearly there must have been so many cases before that where people did have to resort to cannibalism to
yep,
survive at sea because that's, how they accept that. That is
yeah,
wild. How are they able
yeah,
to prove were there, like, witnesses? I know it's been a while since you did
yeah,
this episode.
so it
Were
was
there witnesses that were like, "No, he killed this guy," or something?
yes, yes, so there were 4 people on the boat, and the only one of them perished prior to the other 3 being rescued. So they witnessed the captain kill this
Oh,
man, but he viewed it as an act of mercy because he'd been drinking a bunch of seawater. He was already going to die. Like it was just a matter of when. And his justification was if we wait until he processes all of the salt water, there's going to be nothing worth eating left over because it's all going to be like tainted. And so it's like, that's not the best argument, bro. But also, I mean, you did kind of kill this guy. Like, you did. You're the one that put the penknife in his neck. So, like,
jeez.
you did it. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, you would assume up until that point there would have been a law for that, but
Yeah.
then nope, all of a sudden now, okay, I guess it's against the law now.
If he had died of natural causes, it would have been fine to,
Yep,
have a feast, but wow. Jeez.
I
Yeah,
know. It's the weirdest things that you find
that is
when
wild.
searching for things where you're just like, "Oh, okay." Like but anyway, that is all of my questions. So if you are ready, we can move on to the slang term portion of the show.
Yeah, let's do some slang terms. Let's see if I can crack these words.
We'll see.
I'm not confident in my abilities. I was listening to other episodes before earlier today, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm not gonna know any of these." So, but I'm so ready and so delighted to fail. Like, I'm here for it.
There you go. That's the spirit. That's the spirit right
Yes.
there. Okay. So your first term is light feeders, and I can use it in a sentence
Light feeders, is that with a T or a D?
with a D, like you're feeding somebody.
Light feeders. Okay. Yes, please use it in a sentence.
He was born as a light feeder, but almost dumped out from home due to his bad acts.
Due to his bad acts?
Yeah, like
Like
when he was misbehaving, like he was misbehaving.
ACT. Okay. He was born a light feeder, but wait, say it again, sorry.
So he was born as a light feeder, but almost dumped from home due to his misbehaving.
Okay, so a light feeder. Okay, so we know that there's a light feeder cannot be someone who misbehaves. And light suggests sort of like, I don't know, benevolence or, a good person. So he was born a light feeder. I guess it's someone who I, I don't know, like an upstanding. He was born a light feeder, but I don't know if that makes. I guess I'm gonna have to go with like an all around upstanding guy or something like that.
You are very close. It is
Yeah.
essentially like light feeders meat is like another phrase for silver spoons. So it's kind of like
Oh,
being born with a
okay.
silver spoon in your mouth type of thing.
Huh, okay. So okay, I see. Huh, so I wonder what is a what is do you know where it comes from? Like, why it means what it means?
So it was first used in 1800. It's American in origin. So
Okay.
I don't know where it actually comes from, but essentially it just means it's someone from a very wealthy family who
Okay.
is lives a very
Yeah.
privileged life.
Yes. Okay, okay. A light feeder. I'm curious about that now.
Yeah.
Alright.
Okay. Your second term is rantipole. So
Oh, and
Rantipole.
r
Rantipole.
rantipole, I love the sound of it.
I know.
Rantipole. Anything with the word rant embedded in it is
Yes.
great in my book, so please use it in a sentence.
Okay. The women are ever so rantipole that their husbands cannot sleep in quiet for them.
The women are ever so rantipole that their husbands cannot sleep in quiet for them. I so it's wow, okay. The women are rantipole, so they must be like the women are ever so rantipole. Like, yeah, this is tough. Maybe it's like I mean, their husbands can't sleep, but you don't know if that's because is it like literal, like the women are so rowdy and like gossiping or something, and they're keeping their husbands up, or is it like their husbands are losing sleep over their wives for some other reason because their wives are just so rantipole during the daytime. I, I don't know. Is one rantable during the day or during the night? Is a question I'm trying to work through right now in my head to no avail. I guess
Can be done anytime, day or
it
night.
can be done anytime. Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm no closer to the correct definition of this term now. But thank you. Man, can I ask?
Sure.
Okay, maybe okay, we go okay, so you can do it in the day or in the night. So it's rantable. It's like
It's a definition of like a person, like what sort of like what sort of person, like a it's like a nickname for somebody.
okay. Oh my goodness. I have no idea. I feel like it could be different things, but I guess maybe we'll just say like are so rantable that maybe they're
It's like an adjective.
maybe they're just so they're so blank that their husbands can't sleep and quiet for them. What goes in the blank? They're so like trying like exhaust like they just wear you out or like they or maybe they're demanding because they're like they demand so much of you like they're like do this do that and I can't like you can never stop and just like go to sleep or something like you never stop it so maybe it's I'm gonna go with that they're like demanding and like yeah they demand their husbands do all these things for them all the time.
You are very close. You are very close. So, the literal definition is a wild abandoned woman slash a sex worker.
Oh
But
what.
so so they had this other definition where you could ride a rantipole, which was when the woman would take the superior position in sex. So essentially, if she
Oh,
was
I
riding
see.
the man
Oh my gosh, I
and
feel like I'm too an innocent young boy, like, I didn't even I'm embarrassed now because now it feels like it's so obvious to me. But
well, that's good quality though.
that's not
It's
very
better than being like, "It's just sex. It's just porn. It's
it's
porn.
sex. I know,
Everything's
okay.
porn."
I everything is porn, it is all sex, and I failed to recognize that. It's either sex or cannibalism, you know?
Yep, it's one of the 2.
But also it's like, wow, you're calling these wives rantable? I mean, that's sort of it's a little bit like that's not a nice thing to do because you're essentially comparing them to like sex workers and prostitutes, right, when they're married women. So,
Yeah,
what's up
I
with
found it
that?
was well, and it was first used as early as 1655.
Wow.
And when I was reading it and kind of looking at it, I was like, so this to me just sounds like a woman who knows what she wants. And she's gonna, if she wants to have sex with you and you're not doing it right, she's gonna take the reins, you know?
That's right.
Like, why is that a bad thing? But I mean, who knows?
History. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
they're not supposed to be dominant. Women are supposed to be just lay there and take it.
that's
Only
right.
lewd women take the reins.
Oh my god, so rantipole. Only rantipole women take the reins. That's an awesome word, though. I just love this like I said, I love the sound of it. It just
I know. I know.
yeah,
There are some words that I find where I'm just like, that's a fun thing to say.
it is. It is a fun thing to say.
Yeah. You just gotta make sure that you're using it in a positive way as
That's
opposed
right.
to a negative way when you're describing
It's
somebody with
like
it.
yeah, I mean, exactly. It's a very sex positive, usage of we want sex positive usages of rantipole. Just
Yes.
for everyone. Everyone
Yeah.
listening. Yeah.
No rantipole shaming here. But
No
that's not
rantipole shaming.
we're not that kind of podcast.
We don't rantipole rebuke. We don't do any of that on this
I love
show.
it. I
They
love
don't
it.
do that.
Well, I would like to thank Gavin for joining me today for Can You Crack the Cramp-Word? And before we go, can you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media and when new episodes of your show come out?
Sure. I'm on all the usual platforms. So I'm on X, Instagram, and Facebook. And, you can find the show on Apple and Spotify and all the other podcasting platforms. Episodes come out every 2 weeks, every other Wednesday. And yeah, it doesn't quite go year round because I usually take maybe like a month off between seasons, but otherwise it's pretty steady.
Well, I mean, people need to decompress. I
People
should
need to
start doing that because I
decompress.
really don't do it as much as I should.
You have to. You come out weekly,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot of work.
Well, and on that note, as always, I'm Lindsay, and I'll see you next time with another tale as old as crime.